My name is Morgan, and at 35 years old, I thought I understood the rhythm of my life. Its small joys, its steady disappointments, the compromises I had made in the name of love. I could not have imagined that one phone call would change everything, that in a single day I would inherit $11 million, and in the very same day almost lose my life. Nor could I have imagined that betrayal would slice deeper than broken bones, and that secrets buried for nearly 2 decades would come clawing back into the light. It began quietly. I was at work when the attorney called Benjamin Harrison, representing my estranged Uncle James. Uncle James was more myth than man to me, a shadow that lingered in family stories, a figure my father despised, but whom I remembered with a strange warmth. He was my father's older brother, a man who had turned a family feud into a permanent wall, but who had once shown me wonders during childhood visits to his sprawling estate, his rare books, his tales of business triumphs abroad, his quiet pride in my stubbornness even at 12 years old. Life separated us, but not entirely. He had sent me birthday cards, little letters. I hadn't realized he was building a thread keeping me in his orbit. When I heard he was ill, I visited him in the hospital. Frail, diminished, but his eyes still alive. He told me life was too short for grudges. That visit became many. I mourned him more than I expected when he died. So when Benjamin told me James had left me everything, his estate, his fortune, all $11 million, I sat in stunned silence. It didn't feel real. I was just Morgan, an advertising employee, keeping a modest apartment afloat, a woman married to an artist whose career had long since flatlined. I imagined the money would free us. Eric, my husband, could pursue his art without pressure. We could buy a home, travel, start fresh. I signed the papers and walked out of Benjamin's office, with a future I could barely comprehend. I even bought Eric a watch on my way home. A symbol, a promise. I wanted to surprise him, to see joy light his tired eyes. But as I drove through the drizzle rehearsing how I'd tell him, fate intervened. A semi swerved, time fractured. The world spun in metal and glass. My last memory was absurdly small, a jewelry box opening, the watch sliding across the dashboard, and then darkness. I woke in a hospital bed. My body mangled, ribs, broken leg, fractured tubes, and monitors keeping me tethered to the world. And Eric? Nowhere. Days passed. Nurses left messages. Still, he didn't come. When I finally reached him by phone, his voice was cold, annoyed, almost irritated I had survived. "Some of us," he said, "are moving forward with our lives." His words cut deeper than any scalpel. Lying there abandoned, I began to see the truth unravel. Social media posts of him celebrating new beginnings, whispers from a friend that he was with someone else. The betrayal settled over me like a suffocating blanket. 7 years of marriage reduced to a cruel dismissal, as though I were a burden instead of his wife. As if my broken body and broken trust were inconveniences in his new performance. But betrayal is rarely simple. It tangles with secrets, pulls at the threads of old decisions. Because when Eric finally appeared at my hospital room, not alone, but with a young woman at his side, I recognized something I had buried for 17 years. She wasn't just his new companion, she was a mirror of myself, a resemblance that struck like lightning. And when she looked at me, her face pale with recognition, she whispered words that would shake the foundations of everything I believed. "She is my mother." In that moment, my world broke open again, not just from betrayal, but from a past I had fought to forget. The silence after her words was unbearable. My heart monitor betrayed me with its frantic beeping, echoing the chaos inside my chest. Eric's hand shot out, gripping her arm. "Shut up!" he hissed under his breath, his mask of concern cracking. But Vanessa, yes, I finally had her name, did not look at him. Her wide eyes were fixed on me, trembling as though she had seen a ghost. She reached into her purse with shaking hands and pulled out a photograph. Time slowed as she held it out to me. My breath caught in my throat. It was a picture I had not seen in nearly 2 decades, a younger me, barely 18, holding a newborn baby with eyes red from crying. I had thought that photo destroyed. My parents had insisted on a closed adoption, erasing every trace of what they called a mistake. Yet here it was surviving in Vanessa's hands. "I've been searching for you my entire life," she whispered. "This picture, it's all I had. It came with me when I was adopted. I never stopped wondering who you were." The room spun. Eric snarled something about confusion and manipulation, but I barely heard him. All I saw was the truth undeniable in her face, her features echoing mine. My daughter. The baby I had been forced to give up at 18, the baby I had mourned in secret all these years. I was so young I managed my voice breaking. A senior in high school. My boyfriend ran. My parents wanted no scandal. They sent me away, arranged the adoption. I held you once, just once. And then you were gone. Vanessa sat down on the edge of my bed, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "My adoptive parents were good to me," she said softly. "They told me the truth that my birth mother was very young and wanted me to have a chance. But when Eric found me, I turned to look at him, fury simmering beneath my ribs despite the pain in my body. 'You found the memory box,' I said. 'The one I kept hidden. That's how you knew.' Eric's silence confirmed it. I remembered the box, a tiny hat, a hospital bracelet, the photo. He must have found it when we moved apartments, piecing together a past I had tried to bury. He told me you were searching for me." Vanessa admitted, her voice heavy with shame. "That you wanted to reconnect but were afraid of rejection. He said marrying him would make you proud, that it would bring us together." My stomach turned. He had used her longing, my daughter's yearning for me, as part of his scheme. A fraud designed not only to steal my inheritance, but to twist blood and truth into weapons. Benjamin Harrison, my uncle's lawyer, stepped forward, then breaking the tension like a blade through glass. "Enough," he said, placing a tablet on my bed. On it played footage from his office, Eric and Vanessa presenting falsified death certificates, claiming inheritance rights, forging signatures to access accounts. "We have evidence. You tried to defraud your own wife, Mr. Wallace, and possibly to kill her." Eric's composure shattered. He lunged for the tablet, but Sarah, my nurse, stepped forward with the calm force of someone unafraid. "Hospital security is right outside," she warned. Vanessa recoiled from him, realization dawning. "You used me," she whispered, her face collapsing under the weight of truth. "All those promises, all those words about love and family, it was a lie." Eric's eyes hardened, his mask gone entirely. "Don't be naive," he spat. "You wanted to find your birth mother. I gave you that. The money was just a bonus. Everyone got what they wanted. By declaring me dead," I said, my voice low and steady, "by marrying my daughter, by stealing everything I had. That isn't giving, it's destroying." Benjamin laid out the final devastating detail. James's will had a clause. If Morgan died without children, most of the estate would go to charity. But if a direct descendant was found, the inheritance stayed in the family. You found Vanessa because she was the key. And as her husband, you would have had influence over it all. The truth hung heavy. Eric had never loved me. He had only loved what I could provide: money, stability, now wealth. And when that wasn't enough, he devised a plan to erase me entirely. Vanessa backed away from him, her tears replaced with trembling rage. "You tricked me! You tricked us both!" "Don't be dramatic," Eric snapped, but his voice had lost its power. His lies were unraveling in front of him. Security stepped into the doorway. For the first time in years, I saw Eric cornered not by me, but by the truth. He turned to me, his eyes desperate, trying one last time to wear the mask I had once believed. "Morgan, we can fix this. We can still make it work." But I looked past him at the daughter I had thought gone forever, and I knew there was no going back. Security arrived like a sudden change in weather, the kind you feel on your skin before you see the clouds. Eric tried to square his shoulders and bluff through it, but the performance had nowhere left to go. When the officer stepped inside, he turned to me with the old softness he used to wear when we were new and hopeful, and for a split second, I saw the version of him I'd once loved. It was a trick of light. When they asked him to come with them, he protested with a weary sigh, then snapped at Vanessa, then at Benjamin, then at Sarah, as if anger could make a door swing the other direction. The hallway swallowed him. The room exhaled. I did too. What followed felt less like victory and more like aftershock. Statements, signatures, a measured tone from Detective Jennings over the phone as she listed what they already had attempted: fraud, forged documents, bigamy, and what they were still investigating. I nodded, answered, breathed through the spikes of pain that lanced my ribs when the past surged up. When the nurse finally dimmed the lights, I stared at the ceiling's gentle pattern and realized I had been bracing for years, long before the accident, holding my body in the shape of tolerance so our marriage could keep limping forward. Letting go felt like discovering a muscle I didn't know I possessed. Vanessa returned the next morning with the photograph again, as if to prove neither of us had dreamed it. The edges were soft with handling the paper, slightly bowed the image of my too young face, holding a life I had loved enough to release. I expected anger from her, or accusation, or the kind of brittle politeness I had rehearsed for in case we ever met. Instead, there was a gentleness that undid me. She told me about the librarian mother, who kept home-cooked soups in the freezer for late nights, the science teacher father whose hands smelled faintly of chalk and engine oil, the books stacked on every surface, the rule about no phones at dinner because stories mattered. I listened with a grief that wasn't envy and with gratitude that surprised me. I had asked the universe for her to be loved. It had been answered. I told her the truth. I owed how fear and shame had fenced me in at 18, how I had signed the papers with a trembling hand, how for years I avoided baby aisles and birthdays, because everything pierced. I told her about the wooden box I couldn't throw away. I told her that the day my car spun and metal screamed, I had been on my way to bring good news home to a man who had already replaced me. Pain moved between us like a tide, and then receded, leaving something cleaner behind. She reached for my fingers longer than mine, the nails bitten in the same uneven way, and I felt the simplest, oldest ache in the world, the urge to make room. The hospital days became a kind of hinge the world swung on. Dr. Foster charted the progress of bones and tendons. Dr. Jessica charted the progress of grief. Sarah learned the language of my silences and translated them back to me when I drifted too far into the fog. Benjamin visited with updates. I could hold on to the accounts, locked down the preliminary hearing date, the paper trail that showed how thoroughly Eric had rehearsed his theft. At night, after the machines softened their beeping, I let myself imagine a life not constructed around someone else's need. The thought was frightening and strangely bright. When discharge crept closer, practical questions rose like stones beneath the surface. The apartment held his keys and his ghosts. A hotel would treat me like a patient when what I wanted was a person's life. Vanessa suggested her place, then blushed, then offered again with steadiness. Sarah floated the idea of my uncle's estate, and Benjamin caught it with immediate logistics ramps, grab bars, a downstairs room, a temporary schedule of home PT. I nodded before I could overthink it. The house in the country had been a map of possibility when I was a child. Perhaps it could be sanctuary now. On the day I left, Sarah tucked a note into my discharge folder that said simply, "On the hard days, borrow yesterday's proof." I carried those words like a talisman as Vanessa steered me past city blocks into fields hushed by winter's breath. The estate rose out of the landscape with old bones and wide windows, a house that had seen more seasons than I could count. Benjamin had kept his promises. The front steps were bridged by a smooth ramp. The banister wore a new brace like a discreet piece of jewelry. Inside, the air smelled of lemon oil and quiet. The first night was tender and awkward. We moved around each other like dancers learning a new choreography, waiting for a cue that wouldn't come. In the morning, I learned she sang in the shower, low and off-key, and that she put cinnamon on her coffee. She learned I needed silence until the second cup. We compared scars, hers invisible, mine, sutured and purpled, and agreed both kinds ache when weather changes. In the late afternoon light, I showed her the library, with the first editions locked behind glass, the old globe the size of a moon, the window seat where 12-year-old me had once plotted an imaginary life that involved far fewer compromises. She traced the lines of a map with a fingertip and asked where I would go if it didn't cost anything to leave. Back into myself, I said, and surprised us both. The law kept ticking in the background, steady as a metronome. The detective's team had found a bottle of sedatives filled in my name, a detail so chilling I carried it around like ice in my mouth. Maybe it would remain a question without a verdict. Maybe some truths don't arrive in time for the sentence. But uncertainty didn't get to hold the steering wheel anymore. Benjamin handled filings. I handled learning to walk from one end of the hallway to the other without biting my tongue against pain. Each day I crossed another distance I once thought impossible. On a Tuesday that smelled like thawing earth, I called Vanessa into the study and told her what I wanted to do with the money. My uncle had given it to me because he believed in the life I built from stubbornness and honesty. If he had known about her, he would have written her name into the will with the same pen. I said the words slowly, clearly, like setting a glass down on a table that wobbles. I would share the inheritance equally. She shook her head so fast, tears sprang up, but I didn't let her argue. Love, I told her, is a decision you repeat until it becomes a fact. She pressed her forehead to mine, and we breathed the same air, like two people arriving somewhere they didn't know they were traveling toward. When I slept that night, I dreamed of driving the same road where the truck had come. Only this time the pavement was dry and straight, and the radio was playing a song I didn't recognize, but somehow knew all the words to. I woke up with the melody in my mouth and the taste of road dust turning into light. The worst had not vanished. It had been woven in, and still here was something new, a life that might fit. The estate became both sanctuary and crucible. Each creaking floorboard, each window spilling light across the worn rugs, seemed to test whether I could inhabit this inheritance, not just as a beneficiary, but as someone worthy of it. My uncle had believed in me enough to entrust me with everything. I wasn't sure I believed in myself yet, but each day as I learned to walk further down the halls with my cane and Vanessa's steady hand hovering just behind me, I felt a little less like an imposter. We built rituals to anchor ourselves in the strangeness. Sunday nights became movie marathons on the old projector in the library. Vanessa laughing too loudly at comedies. Me quietly crying at dramas, both of us slowly rewriting what family evenings could mean. Thursday evenings we attempted cooking experiments, often failing spectacularly, but always ending in laughter. These small acts stitched time together, filling the 17-year silence between us with shared moments we could actually hold. Physical therapy was brutal. Muscles screamed, bones ached, and on some mornings I wondered if I would ever walk without the shadow of pain. But Vanessa insisted on cheering for every small victory, one extra step, one less grimace. She brought cupcakes home from the local bakery whenever I met a milestone candle stuck into the frosting, as if each triumph were a birthday. The sweetness often made me cry not from sugar, but from the unfamiliar experience of being celebrated simply for enduring. Emotional healing was messier. There were nights I lay awake replaying Eric's words, the cold dismissal of me as a loser, the forged documents, the lies he had spun so easily. 7 years of marriage, and I had never truly known the man beside me. Betrayal has a way of rewriting the past, painting every tender memory in new colors until even joy feels suspect. Dr. Jessica, ever practical, told me in our video sessions, "You're grieving two losses at once, the husband you thought you had, and the illusion you built around him." She urged me not to rush forgiveness, not for him, but for myself. Vanessa too was grieving. Not only the manipulation she had endured at Eric's hands, but the collision of two identities, the daughter of kind adoptive parents who had given her stability, and the daughter of a birth mother who had vanished into secrecy. She asked questions cautiously at first, then with urgency. What did I think when I found out I was pregnant? Did I hold her long enough to feel her heartbeat? Did I want her? Every answer cracked me open, but I gave them honestly. She deserved truth, not the sanitized half-stories I had once been told to repeat. And then came the day she asked the hardest question of all. "Why didn't you try to find me?" I swallowed back tears, forced myself to meet her eyes. "Because I was afraid," I admitted. "Afraid you'd hate me." Afraid you'd be happier without me. Afraid that if I saw you thriving with another family, it would break me all over again. Her expression softened, her hand finding mine. I could never hate you, she whispered. That forgiveness undid years of shame in a single breath. It was Vanessa's idea to invite her adoptive parents to the estate. I spent days worrying about it, convinced they would resent me, view me as an interloper trying to reclaim what I'd once surrendered. But when they arrived, a warm woman with kind eyes and a tall man with hands rough from work, they greeted me with grace that left me trembling. We've always known this day would come, her mother said. And we're grateful it has, even if the road here was painful. Instead of rivalry, they offered solidarity. Over tea in the sunlit dining room, I realized that love is not a limited resource to be divided, but something that multiplies when shared. Meanwhile, Eric's trial moved forward in the background. Court dates, statements, evidence piling like bricks in a wall he could no longer scale. I faced him across the courtroom, once his orange jumpsuit draining the arrogance from his face. He tried to meet my eyes with a faint smile, the one he used to disarm me. I looked away. My heart had no space left for his illusions. When the sentence came, 8 years for fraud, forgery, bigamy, and conspiracy, I felt not triumph, but a strange quiet. Closure doesn't always roar. Sometimes it settles like a sigh. Spring bled into summer, and the estate bloomed. Vanessa and I planted a garden together, our hands dirty in the same soil, watching green shoots push stubbornly toward the sun. It felt symbolic, almost cliché, but I embraced it. Growth is growth, no matter how obvious the metaphor. The rhythms of life at the house became less awkward, more natural. She sang in the kitchen while I wrote at the desk, and sometimes I caught myself smiling without realizing it. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills in gold, Vanessa asked, "Do you regret it?" Not me, never me, but everything that happened, the accident, Eric, all of it. I thought carefully before answering. Regret would mean I'd undo it. And I wouldn't. Not if it meant never finding you again. She leaned her head against my shoulder. For the first time in a long while, I felt the warmth of belonging. By autumn, the estate no longer felt like someone else's legacy. It felt like home. The walls that once intimidated me had grown familiar with our laughter, our arguments, our tentative music of daily life. The air no longer echoed with emptiness, but carried the rhythm of a household rebuilding itself out of broken pieces. Vanessa had enrolled in university by then, commuting to the city a few days a week to study psychology. She told me she wanted to help other adoptees and birth parents navigate the stormy waters we had barely survived ourselves. I could see her adoptive mother's steadiness in her father's curiosity, and to my surprise, a sliver of my own determination. "You gave me resilience," she said once, almost shyly. I shook my head, tears welling. "No, you built that yourself. I just passed you the spark." My physical recovery slowed but didn't stall. The surgeons had been right, the pain became manageable, the limp permanent but not defining. Each time I crossed the garden without crutches, Vanessa clapped like I had scaled Everest. Progress felt less like triumph, and more like a quiet reclaiming of self. Step by step, I was walking away from the wreckage Eric had left behind. The court case ended with finality. Eric was sentenced to 8 years in prison, though no number could measure the damage he had inflicted. I sat through the last hearing with my cane resting against my leg, listening as his list of charges was read aloud. Fraud, forgery, bigamy, attempted theft, conspiracy. Words that once would have shattered me now felt like weights lifted from my shoulders. When the gavel struck, I did not cheer. I simply breathed easier. Justice, I realized, is less about punishment and more about being freed from someone's hold. But life was no longer about Eric. It was about what I wanted to build in the ruins. I began writing again, at first scribbles in a notebook during sleepless nights, then longer pieces that grew into chapters. Fiction laced with truth, pain reshaped into narrative. The process was therapy, but it was also something more, a reminder that I could shape my own story, not just survive inside someone else's. With Benjamin's guidance, I established a foundation in Uncle James's name, focused on supporting young single mothers and promoting ethical adoption practices. The irony was not lost on me, using the inheritance that nearly destroyed me to protect others from similar fates. But it felt right. Out of grief and betrayal, something good was being planted. The estate became a hub of new traditions. Sunday dinners with Vanessa's adoptive parents, where we laughed over burnt roasts and passed down recipes. Holiday gatherings, where Sarah, my nurse-turned-friend, always arrived with extra dessert. Even Benjamin sometimes stayed after meetings, his once formal presence softening into something like family. Slowly, I realized that family wasn't just blood or law, it was choice, commitment, and care repeated daily. On the one-year anniversary of the crash, we held a gathering at the estate. The house that once held secrets now opened its doors to people who had carried me through darkness. Sarah, Benjamin, Detective Jennings, Dr. Jessica, and of course Vanessa and her parents. We toasted not to survival, but to transformation. Later that night, after the dishes were cleared and the laughter faded, Vanessa and I sat on the porch steps looking out at the fields bathed in starlight. She asked the question I had been asking myself for months. If you could change it all, erase the accident, erase Eric, would you? I thought carefully before answering. If I changed it, I might never have found you again, and that's a price I would never pay. Silence stretched between us, but it was a gentle silence filled with understanding. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I felt at last like a mother. Betrayal had nearly broken me. The crash had shattered my body. Eric's lies had gutted my heart, and the secret of my lost daughter had threatened to crush me with guilt. But in the end, those same disasters cleared space for something stronger: truth, connection, and a family I never believed I could have. I look back now and see that sometimes life has to strip us down to our barest, most broken selves before it offers us a chance to rebuild. I lost a husband, but I gained a daughter. I lost illusions, but I gained clarity. I lost an old life, but I gained one infinitely more real. And so I ask you watching this, have you ever faced a betrayal so deep it forced you to start over? Did it destroy you, or did it deliver you somewhere unexpected, somewhere better? If my story has touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe for more stories of resilience and leave me a comment with your own story. Because sometimes the very crash that breaks us can be the one that finally sets us free.